When it comes to reading a chart, it's important to remember that charts are always written so that they give you all the information that you need. If your chart is knit flat, like ours will be for the blocks, there will be a number on each side of the chart that will tell you which side is which row. So, right side rows will always start on the right side, and the wrong side or back side rows will always start from the left side. It's a hard thing to remember that you read from right to left as you're on the right side, and you read from left to right when you're on the wrong or back side. But it's not that difficult, and I know that you'll pick it up quickly with just a few more tips from me. So let's talk about how to read a chart. I introduced you to a little bit of that when I was showing you how to read your pattern. So we're going to talk about how to read your little chart right here. So if you look over here, you actually have the written words where it says slip 1 and then knit 2 and then knit 1. And it has some funky little stars in there. And that is because when you see those things, you're actually going to repeat the instructions between the stars or between the bars on your chart in order to knit all of your stitches across your square. So, what does that really mean? What it means is, when we come to this first symbol, you can see it's a little V. So I have to go look that up, and when I come over here to my key, it says that that is a slip. And on the right side I would slip it, and on the wrong side I would slip it. Okay. When we look at the next block, that one says that we would do what? It's just a blank square, right? Well, we're going to knit that. So you can see that it says on the right side we would knit this, but on the wrong side we have a different definition. It means that we would purl that stitch. So if you recall, I talked earlier about making certain that you knew if you were on the right side or wrong side of your key. And that is because when we read our key on that first row from right to left, we read it as slip, knit, knit, knit. But when we read it on row 2, we're actually reading the wrong side of our work because we've turned it around. So that means that we have to slip the first stitch because that was the same instruction on both sides. But now this means to purl. So it's purl, purl, purl. I know, it's really hard to wrap your head around. But that's why it's really important to see your key and your chart together so that you can compare the stitches and you know what you need to be doing for both of them. That's why I like to make certain that I keep my big key handy as I'm learning a chart so that I know what I'm doing. So let's go over this one more time. When we are reading our charts, when we're on the right side, which is indicated by the number 1 over here, we would start and we would slip and then knit until there was only 1 stitch left, and then we would knit that stitch. And then on row 2, because it's the wrong side of the work, we would still slip, because when we came to our key, it told us that we would slip on the wrong side as well. But when we come to the next stitch, we have to purl, because the key tells us that on the wrong side, we are going to purl. So we would slip the first stitch and then purl all the way across until the last stitch. And that is how we would read our chart. Now, when we come to row 3, we do something a little bit different. This one's still on the right side, so we're going to slip that first stitch just like we had done on the rows previously. And then we are going to knit a stitch, and then what is this? This is a bar. So when we go look for the square with the bar in it, you can see it says to purl. So on the right side, we're going to purl, and if it was on the wrong side, we would knit. I know it's a little confusing, but hang on. Let's just read it as a right side row because that's what the 3 indicates. So we're going to slip that first stitch. We're going to knit a stitch and purl a stitch. And because we know that those are between the red lines, and that is our pattern repeat. We are then going to go back and go knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, until only one stitch remains, and then we are going to knit that stitch. Did that make sense to everyone? I hope it did. When we start on this right side row and we're repeating the stitches across, it's 2 stitches wide, and you would knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, all the way across your row until only 1 stitch remains. And because we have cast on 32 stitches with this block, that means that we would have slipped the first stitch, worked 30 stitches, and had 1 stitch left. 1 plus 30 plus 1 is 32. Okay? Then when we look at row 4, we're on the wrong side. So now we have to think about what it's telling us to do on the wrong side of the work. So remember that slip stitch is the same. We know that when it's on the wrong side with a blank square that we're going to purl it. And we need to go back to our chart where it tells us that when we have that bar, we are going to knit it on the wrong side. So for row 4, you're going to slip the first stitch, then you will purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, all the way across your row until you have 1 stitch left, at which point you would purl it. And that is how we read our chart. It's not that hard once you understand that right side rows will have the number on the right side, wrong side rows will have the number on the left side, and that when you work across on the right side, you have to do what the chart tells you to do on the right side. And when you work across the wrong side, you have to do what the chart tells you on the wrong side. So it's not that difficult, I promise. And if you have questions or need a little more help, you can certainly contact me or any of your classmates.